Hi, everyone. I would like to say greetings wherever you happen to be today. We have a wonderful guest today. This is a woman, I would say, of many, many talents. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Kay Thompson is a minister, a TV host. She's an author. She's a realtor, and she's a business owner. My gosh, all of those. I want to find out how she does all those. But anyway, Kay, I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad that you're here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here and thank you for contacting me. Excited.
Well, how do you do all those things all at once?
Well, I definitely can't do them all at once, right?
Oh, okay. Well,
So have to kind of parse them out each day. And as I get assignments, that's how it goes. And got to prioritize one over the other.
well, we will get to all of those, I am sure, in the course of the next hour or so. But I'm really glad that you're here. And as I said, I've been looking forward to this for a while, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of fun. Why don't we start? Maybe you could go back and tell us kind of about the early Kay growing up, a little about you, so people can get to know you.
Oh, yeah. So growing up, was the daughter of a military father,
Ah,
military officer, as a matter of fact. He rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel. So that was interesting. So it was kind of a privileged military life in that sense that, he just he was a very important figure in his time. So that was interesting walking on the base with him, and people would stop and salute him. It was and I was just a little tot, just running alongside him, and just real proud of my father.
did you have
And
any? Did you have any siblings?
I have two brothers.
Ah,
Yeah, they both live in Arizona. I was in the middle, so smashed right in the middle between two uh very muscular, they had a very commanding presences. So in between the two brothers there, um, yeah. And then my mother, she was an English teacher and did excellent in her own right. She did a lot of drama, um, just a lot of teaching. She ended up in her 60s getting her doctorate degree and just really excelled in education. And so she was the one that was really big on education, go to school, go to school, go to school. I don't want to go to school. Well, you need to go to school anyway. So I went to school anyway. That's how I can say my life was
now where did you grow up?
all over, all
Okay,
over.
you did. I was going to ask if you did a lot of travel since your dad was in the military.
Yeah, we certainly did. I was born in Tacoma, Washington.
Oh,
I don't remember any portion of it because we were only there basically so I could be born, I feel like. I know that's not the reason,
yeah.
but we went to Washington so I could be born. And then we lived there about a year. And then we moved to New York City. Then we moved to, now by this, my brother was already born because all of us are 3 years apart. So my brother was born in Verdun, France.
Okay.
And um, and then they moved to, I can't remember where they were before that. I don't know if they went straight to from there to Washington State, and then we moved to New York, and then we went to Aberdeen, Maryland,
Mm.
and that's where my younger brother was born. And then
So
from there we went to Germany. We stayed there for about 3 years. From Germany, we went to, I can't believe I remember all this. And from Germany, we went to Ohio. We stayed there for a couple of years. And actually, we were there when they had that tornado. It was like in the 70s. There was a
mhm.
tornado in Zenith, Ohio. Well, we weren't far from Zenith at the time. So we were there. Then we moved from there to Virginia. And they was there for 3 years, then to New Jersey. And then that's where my father retired. So we were all over the place.
You were. My
Yeah.
gosh. Well, did you learn any of the foreign languages when you were in Germany and France, or yeah,
In Germany, I only remember vaguely, you know, hello, thank
yeah,
you. I don't know what it is now. Auf Wiedersehen, goodbye. Danke and bitte, thank you, you're welcome, and Gesundheit,
Gesundheit. Yeah, well,
you
there you
know,
go.
but no, no, we didn't do that at all. Yeah.
So, but you certainly did a lot, and you had a lot of adventures. How do you think that all of that travel affected you as you grew older? What did it do that helped shape you?
Well, I know that, of course, traveling, you hear the story about kids all the time. They travel, and because if they're moving a lot, it's hard to create lasting long-term friendships because you're just constantly moving and never mind moving to another city, but when you go to another state, even from another country. Now, I did happen to have a friendship with a young lady. Her name was Audrey. And I met her in Germany, and I was between the age of about 3 to 5. I met her in Germany, and we stayed friends till I was in Virginia. So you're talking from Germany
Wow.
to Maryland to Virginia. We were friends until Virginia. But then once I left Virginia and went to New Jersey, and I was there for my part of my middle school and then the rest of my high school, we fell out of touch. So that was one of the things I would say is difficult. Just having lifelong friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably one of the more difficult things. But one thing on the other side is it made great being that person that was a world traveler. It was great when you're in school and they ask you in your classroom, hey, tell us something unique about you. Oh, well, I've been to Germany because my parents, when we were in Germany, they wasted no time traveling. They were always traveling. We were on the road all the time. I mean, literally. And,
Hmm.
you know, they, um, they were just great world travelers. We went to Italy, we went to Spain, we went to France, we went to Switzerland, we went everywhere in Europe that they could get in that Volvo that they had. We had a
Hmm.
nice little Volvo, and we would pitch out at campsites, just any way they could to get where they needed to get because they wanted to see these sites. And
Hmm.
especially because my mother was an English teacher, she did a lot of plays, she directed a lot of plays, a lot of Shakespeare. And so a lot of these places were in these books, in this literature that she taught. And I'm sure that's probably one of the major reasons they did all this traveling, all these places that she had studied about and, taught about, she actually got to go see. Now, I must say, the only place I didn't go to that I wanted to go to, that for some reason she took my older brother. She didn't take no one else went but my mother and my older brother. And I can't understand that trip to this day. Those two went to Greece.
Hmm.
We didn't know, no one else in the family went to Greece. And I meant to ask, I'm going to, when I finish this interview, I'm going to call my brother and ask him, why did you and mom go to Greece? Because nobody else got to go, but I would have loved to go there as well. But at the time, you're a kid, you're like, oh, okay, mom and Chuck are going away. Okay. But now that I think back and look back, maybe it was, I never asked about that, but I'm going to ask.
Did
Yeah.
did it help you though develop a sense of adventure um, and not create any kind of fear of traveling around? Did it make you a more curious person because you got to go to so many places? I
Oh
asked
yeah.
that in the on the basis of as you grew older and thought about it.
Oh yeah. I'm a very curious person, and at times I can be a little nosy, right?
Well, that's okay.
And so yeah, so that to me was, I think, one of the ways that expanded my mind in terms of wanting to know about people and about things, because I've worked in public relations for many years. And so just being able to understand the perspective of other people from different cultures and different mindsets, being open to people from different cultures, different races, different religions, wanting to hear their point of view, interested in, how they feel about things, because you can have a subject or you can have something come up and you have so many different perspectives from people, and you can see the very same thing. They can be shown the very same thing, but one person sees it from their lens, from where,
Yeah.
whether it's how they grew up or their external influences. And then someone can see the very same thing and interpret it totally different.
Yeah. Well,
So, yeah.
one of the things that I've noticed in talking to a number of people who came from military families and others as well who did do a fair amount of travel to various countries and so on, they do tend to be more curious, and I think that's a very positive thing. They have a broader outlook on so many things, and they tend to be more curious and want to learn more and wish that more people could have the same experiences that they had.
Yeah, I mean, not afraid to try new things too,
Mm-hmm.
or different things that other people would not like. I remember in Germany being very young, being fed octopus and snail, these delicacies over there in Germany. I
Yeah.
remember that at where my father was stationed in Germany, the street, it was in like a court area. It felt like a court area, big apartments set up in a U shape, and then right across in a U shape in the middle of a field, like an open space, not a field, but an open space. And then right outside of that open space, we could jump out of that open space right into a busy street called Romastrasse. And right on the other side of that busy street was Old Town Germany.
Mm.
Literally stepping, there were no fences and no bars and no gates. We're stepping straight from our backyard into Germany, because the base was more Americanized. So you really felt
Yeah.
Americanized on the base. But once you stepped into Germany, the houses were these, it was cobblestone streets. And I remember me and my brothers used to walk out of our backyard, that big open area, and go across the street into Germany and get the authentic gummy bears. And
Mm-hmm.
that was our weekly trip. And these gummy bears, I'm telling you now, for gummy bear enthusiasts out there, the gummy bears in Germany look nothing like these gummy bears that we see here. They were huge. They were the cutest little bears. I almost felt guilty eating them, but we just had a great time. I remember great memories from our exploits, our visits. The life was different. Toilet paper was harder.
Yeah.
I can just remember. Now that was years ago. I don't know what it's like now, but
Yeah.
but yeah.
But did the gummy bears taste better?
Well, now I can't remember, because when you're a kid, any candy, if you say candy, I say, yeah, how much,
Yeah.
So when I was that young, I couldn't tell, but they probably did, but then again, for those people that, like, because I don't drink, but the beer there is
Mm-hmm.
much darker too.
Yeah.
So some people don't like that. So better to them, could be, we don't like it to us. So,
I've never been to China, but I've been to Japan twice, and
mm,
there's a food in China called dim sum. Are you familiar with dim
yes,
sum?
I
Okay,
am.
I'll tell you, dim sum in Japan I think better. It's different and tastes better than dim sum in the United States. Now I have to go to China one of these days and try it.
Yeah. Well, if
But
you ever
that's
go to the buffets, have you ever gone to
yeah.
yeah. Okay, so if you notice, the people that work there, they do not eat the food that is
Mm-mm.
the buffet.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, so one day I'm gonna do this too. I'm gonna be like, hey, can I have some of what
What you
your
guys eat? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, but it is interesting. It's fun to investigate and explore. And I haven't traveled around the world much. I have, as a speaker, had some opportunities to travel, but I think my curiosity came from being a blind person who was encouraged by my parents to explore. And the result was that I did a lot of exploring just even in our house, around our neighborhood. And of course, when the internet came along, and I still believe this is true, it is a treasure trove of just wonderful places to go visit. And yeah, I know there's the dark web and all that, but I ignore that. Besides that, probably the dark web is inaccessible, and maybe someday somebody will sue all the people who have sites on the dark web because they're not accessible. But nevertheless, the internet is just a treasure trove of interesting places to visit in so many ways.
Yeah. And then virtual reality. So one of the places that I wanted to go to was I've always wanted to go to Egypt.
Mm,
I haven't had an opportunity yet, and personally right now don't know how, how good an idea that is right now.
yeah.
But I went to a recent VR exploration of the pyramids in Egypt.
Mm,
And I'm telling you, if that was how it seemed, it definitely was a way to help me to, live it out, so to speak. Because there's like, for instance, there's a place in Florida called the Holy Land. The Holy
mm,
Land, just like a theme park. And they say it looks, there are areas where it looks just like Israel, parts of
yeah.
Israel. So, in that respect, I've been able to realize some portion of the dream. But yeah,
I have been
ultimately,
to,
I'd love to get there.
I have been to Israel, and I
Oh,
enjoyed that
have
very
you?
much. Yeah, I was in Israel 2 years ago,
Oh,
almost 2 years ago.
wonderful.
Well,
Oh,
so what did you do after high school?
oh, after high school. Interesting. So, remember when I was telling you about the school thing? So, I was in and out of school. I started college in New Jersey,
Where did you
and
go?
I went to Rutgers University.
Rutgers.
Yeah. Well, first I started in New Brunswick.
Okay.
Um, then I came back because we lived closer to Camden. We lived in New Jersey, closer to Philadelphia. Philadelphia was about 20 minutes away.
Okay. I lived
So,
in I lived in Westfield, New Jersey, so we were out Route 22 from New York about 15 miles. So we were in the north central part of the state, or
okay,
south north part or whatever of the state.
okay. Yeah, well, yeah, first it was in New Brunswick, I was there, and then after I did that, I went for about a semester, and then I transferred over to Hampton University because both my parents went to Hampton. So I said, let me
Okay.
try Hampton. Didn't stay there, and then I ended up coming back and going to Rutgers in Camden, and there I completed my degree. It took me 8 years to complete it.
What did you get your degree in?
I got my degree in art history
Okay.
and sculpture. So
Okay.
yeah, and I love what I did. I had a museum, loved working in a museum, and could tell you about all the art, the sculpture. Just loved it. But it took me a minute to get that.
Yeah.
Then, uh, and then after that, I moved to Atlanta in '92, the end of '92. So uh, after high school, just a lot of challenges, just trying to figure out who I was
Yeah.
and
And
what
what
I
you
wanted to
wanted to
do. You
do.
know how
Yeah.
it is. Um, I wished I would have, now looking back on it, I wish I would have maybe when I got out of high school, just taken some time off first, you know,
Mm,
and because in my heart, I knew I knew I didn't want to go to school, but I knew I needed to go. I knew
okay.
there was something in me that said you need to go to school, but mentally, I don't think I was mentally prepared for it. For the, because when you get out of high school and you go into college, unless you take AP courses in high school, you're not prepared for the amount of work you're going to get inundated with. And it was just overwhelming to me. It took all my time. I felt like I was that person. I had to keep reading things over and over again just to get it. I used to have to, not only did I take, what a friend of mine calls copious notes,
Yeah.
but then I also had to put it over in index cards. And, it just took me a long time because my heart wasn't in it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up meeting a gentleman, my first husband. We were married, we had a son. But he passed away, I think when my son was about 3. And then that's when, okay, Kay, now now I wanted to go. Now I wanted to finish.
So it was your husband that passed away?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
All right. So then
So
you decided you really needed to do
yeah,
school.
yeah, I needed to complete it. So
So
that's what really pushed me to complete it.
leaving the major aside of sculpture and art and art history and so on, if you were to summarize it, what did college teach you?
Oh, that's a great question. What did college teach me? Well, it taught me that, you know, I think we just need to, we need to know how to focus. It's really was a disciplining moment in my life. I was an army brat,
Mm.
this bottom line, I was an army brat. Even though I felt like I didn't get a whole lot of things that I wanted, in reality, I had a kind of a spoiled mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to college, I realized that this stuff is not going to be handed to me. You're not going to be handed an A. I'm not going to do your studying for you. And so helping me to kind of detach from things I had just depended on for so long. But in that transition, it became very lonely. Was very lonely. I mean, even when I left, because I got out of, when I first went to Rutgers in New Brunswick, right out of high school, I was at the dorm, and I wasn't ready for a dorm. I wasn't ready for that life,
Mm-hmm.
because you know I left almost before the semester was over, and I had to go and make up the classes. And, thankfully, they allowed me to make up some of my, majority of, well, as a matter of fact, they let me make them all up, but I still had to put in the work.
Yeah.
And that was my thing, putting in the work, and doing things that I didn't necessarily like. Because even though I liked art and I liked sculpture and all that, there were other classes that I had to take, like humanities and algebra, and history, not art history, but, American history, European history, and all these
Mm-hmm.
different other subjects, these other prerequisites or curriculum that you have to take. And I didn't always enjoy those. And I thought, I don't want to do that. But no, you actually have to do it. So I'm going to say that college really helped me learn about disciplining
Mm-hmm.
myself to do things that I don't necessarily like, but they are required of me.
And I would tell you, if you asked me the same question, that would be my answer. It really taught me a lot about discipline. It taught me also to realize that I really did like, and appropriately so, adventure and exploration and being curious and so on. Um, I also found that my best college courses were the ones, no matter what the subject was or whether I really enjoyed it or not, were the ones where I had good teachers who really could teach and who were concerned about students and interacting with students rather than just giving you assignments because they then wanted to go off and do their thing. But I liked good teachers. And I went to the University of California at Irvine and had, very fortunately, a lot of good teachers who encouraged discipline and being able to function in unexpected ways, and they also pointed out how to recognize, like if you're doing something right, like in physics, when my master's is in physics, one of the first things that one of my professors said is, you've got to get the right answer, but the right answer isn't just getting the right numbers. Like
Mm.
if you are trying to compute acceleration, which we know is 16 feet per second squared, or 9.8 meters per second squared. Um, that's not right. Anyway, 32 feet per second, or 9.8 meters per second. Um, it isn't enough to get the 32 feet or the 9.8 meters. You got to get meters per second squared, because that, and never mind why it is, but that is the physics term for acceleration. So it isn't enough to get the numbers, which is another way of saying that they taught me to really pay attention to the details, which
Yeah.
was cool. And I'm hearing from you sort of the same thing, which is great. But then you went to college and you majored in what you did. And so did you work in the museum part of the time while you were in college?
Well, what happened is I had an art history teacher who just took I guess, a liking to me because I was very enthusiastic about what I did because I loved what I did. And I had a writing background because I had a mother who was an English teacher. So all my life, I was constantly being edited. So I came in with pretty good grammar, and pretty good way to, I had I had a talent for writing in a way that the academics were looking for that art
Mm-hmm.
history kind of. So I knew how to write that way. And she hired me to help her. She was a professor that did, lectures, and she hired me, paid me out of her own salary, kind of like a work study. And so I worked for her about 20 hours a week, just filing slides and helping her with whatever she needed because she
Mm-hmm.
was also the chair of the department. So that was a great opportunity. I was able to work with her and made me feel good to know somebody thought enough of what I did to hire me and feel like I I could contribute and that I was trusted to be able to handle some of these things. I mean, and I don't know how difficult it is to file slides, but when a teacher wants to do a lecture, and back then they were these little small little square slides
Square
you
slides,
would
right.
drop into the projector.
Right.
And if she's looking for, the temple of Nike, she wants to find it in order. You pull that slide and you put it in your projector and you
Right.
got all
Put
these
it in the
slides. So
carousel, right.
yes, yes. So uh, that's what I did, and it was great. I loved it. I
There's
loved
a
college. I loved the college atmosphere. I loved being in that vein, and I think I really found my niche when I went to Rutgers in Camden. Hmm.
well, there's a history lesson, sports fans, because now of course it's all PowerPoint, but back then, as Kay's describing it, when you wanted to project things, you had slides. So they were pictures, they were films, and they were all these little squares,
Hmm.
maybe 2 inches square, and you put them in a carousel and you put them in the projector. And every time you push the button, it would go to the next slide, or you could go
Exactly.
back the other way. So PowerPoint is only making it a little bit more electronic, but the same concept is still there. So there,
There.
I dealt with slides. So after college, you did time at the museum, I gather.
Okay, so what happened with the museum? After I graduated from college, immediately I moved to New Jersey.
Yeah.
Right, I'm gonna say probably about 6 months to a year before college is when my first husband died. And then after I graduated, I moved to New Jersey.
And where
First,
did you graduate from again?
Rutgers University in Camden.
Okay, so that's New Jersey. But after college, you moved
I moved to Georgia.
Georgia. That makes more sense. Okay.
Okay. Sorry for that. Yeah, so I moved to Georgia, and immediately when we came to Georgia, you know, my I came with a gentleman who I married shortly after I moved to Georgia, and we opened a art gallery. We
Mm,
were entrepreneurs. We came because, you know, we felt like there was more opportunity in Georgia for small business owners or would be potential small business owners or people who wanted to realize their dream. And we know that in Georgia now, I don't know if you know this, but Georgia is a great place for entrepreneurs.
mm-hmm.
So definitely better than where I was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So we packed the U-Haul and just threw everything in there and came to Atlanta. Now, the gentleman who would be my husband, so I just say my husband now, then he he had a sister here. So we visited first with her, and that's how we got to really see the scene, check out the scene. And then we came back and moved and found our own place and everything like that. So, but when we came, I opened it, I had an art gallery for about a year or so, a little bit longer. And, but that didn't work out, didn't, you know, it just, you know, some things you try
Yeah.
just didn't work. But then my husband, and now just FYI for you, this person, the second person I married, the second man, he passed away too. But that was in 2008. But so he's my late husband too. So I have two husbands that passed away. One was the first one was much younger, and my second husband, we were married for 16 years.
Mm,
This is early on in our relationship. We he opened a brass outlet, a just all kinds of beautiful black brass vases and animals and just anything brass you wanted. But also, after I shut down the museum I had, or the gallery, it was an art gallery, I moved my pieces into his brass outlet. And there I was able to kind of display them and sell
mm,
them. We had pieces that range from, you know, $25 to $500.
mm-hmm.
So I found a little space there that I could do my work. So it was a nice little coupling. Yeah.
I'm with you.
Uh-huh. So yeah.
So, so, um, you, you have obviously moved on from doing a lot of that because now you have other endeavors, as we mentioned at the beginning, being a minister, an entrepreneur, an author, and so on. So, how did you transition from just doing art to doing some of the things that you do today?
Okay. So what happened is when I came to, and I guess this is the really deeply more personal aspect of it all. When I came to Atlanta, again, my first husband had passed away. He committed suicide.
Oh,
Yeah. So when I came to Atlanta, my second husband and I were not yet married. And all I knew is that I wanted the relationship not to be the way the first one was, in a sense of I didn't want to go through that specific kind of trauma again.
mm-hmm.
And not that the two gentlemen were similar, they were very different people. My second husband was a very confident, a very strong-willed, you know, type of a person. But the trauma and my first husband, he had his own strength in, you know, but there's something that happens when you decide, you know, to end your life.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that I had some sort of support, divine support, because the going through something like that, and when I say something like that, not only am I talking about the suicide, but the fact that we were on the phone together when this happened. So, and then just dealing with everything that happened around it, you can imagine someone feeling a little bit insecure or a little
Mm-hmm.
bit unsure.
Mm-hmm.
So I really began to seek God for that relationship that I know would sustain me. I had grown up, my parents grew up, they brought us to church. I
Right.
wouldn't say my parents they weren't ministers, but they were active in whatever church they went to. And they made sure that we went to church every Sunday, even the vacation Bible school. I can remember that in New Jersey. I remember, them just being a very, very involved. My parents, my mother was a singer, so she sang a lot in the choir, a lot of solos. My father was a deacon. They both became elders. And elders, meaning they were just senior members
Right.
of ministry, because elder in the I'm in a non-denominational ministry now, but elder is another way of saying a ordained male minister.
Mm-hmm.
But in their particular denomination, an elder was, almost you might want to say like a trustee.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so, but they were integral to their church, and they were really foundational members. And so I just remember that impact on my life. And so I needed to make sure I had that grounding. And I knew I didn't have it because I was doing any and everything I wanted to do. One of the reasons my second husband said, I was the one for him is because we had a drinking competition and I beat him. We were taking shots and and I beat him. And so, that was something that, he said, oh, you're, girl, you're the one for me. And so that was our life running. We did a lot of, we entertained, we did a lot of partying, as you say, a lot of having a great time. We were living our best life.
Right.
So I knew I wasn't living a life, that I could tell, hey, God, see my life. Aren't you proud? It wasn't that life I was living. I wasn't, doing biblical
Right.
things. I wasn't living life right. So I needed to make sure when I came to when I came to Atlanta from New Jersey with this gentleman that I had not yet married, I said, Lord, help me make the right decision. And I'd say, could we move to Georgia it was something like January, February. Okay, we got married about 2 months later. And then a month after that, I was pregnant with my daughter. So it happened very fast.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing about it is, of course, when you're pregnant as a woman, you can't do this. I couldn't do the things that I was doing before.
Right.
The partying, smoking, the drinking, all of that, for the sake of the child, you just can't do it. So I went through a terrible withdrawal. Yeah, it was pretty bad. And the only refuge I had was the church.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I really got into the church. And once I got into the church, I had been in the church before. I had made a decision when I was I'm going to say about 5 or 6 years prior to that. I had given my life to the Lord. I had, come into a relationship with the Lord, but life happened and I got out of it. I quickly kind of got out of it. And so for many years, I was just doing my own thing. So again, when we came to Georgia, I got pregnant, got married, going through with the withdrawals, I just went back into the church, rekindled that relationship, or the Bible says that he's with loving kindness has he drawn you. So he really drew me back based on my need. And so I came back to the church and got really, really involved in ministry. And as I got involved, I just kind of threw myself into it because I could not do the previous things I did. And then even after I had my second child, it's a daughter, so I have a son and a daughter. I had to live a life that was good for them. And
What did your husband think of all that?
oh, yeah. Well, first he thought I had joined a cult.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was his first impression. So he came to the church because he wanted to see who these cult members were that were drawing away his wife. And when he came, he got kind of hooked to the church.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
But our faith was never at the same level.
Hmm.
He came because of me. I came because of God.
Right.
And I don't know if he ever really, I don't think he ever really got to that level that I did, where I was just gung ho. Everything was, I was a Jesus girl. I was a holy roller, and he did it for us. He did it for, task's sake, because he was a task oriented person. But he came to be a very, like my parents, he came to be a very important part of the church. He was a deacon. He was faithful. He loved our leaders. He served with faith and integrity. But when it came to that, you know, deep-seated personal relationship with God, where, God, I just give you everything, that was mine. That was what I
Hmm.
did. So we differed in that respect.
Yeah. Well, um, well, hopefully though, in the long run, you said he's passed. I assume it was not a suicide,
No, no.
uh, and that he is um, he is moving on in that faith. So that's a hopeful thing.
Yeah. I believe he is. He had congestive heart failure and he passed away. And yeah, I believe he's now at rest, enjoying
Mhm.
his rest.
There
Yes,
you go. So when did he pass?
in 2008.
Okay, so that was 17 years ago. Okay.
Yep.
Well, so you were very involved in the church, and I suppose in some senses it's probably a question that is reasonably obvious, but then I'll still ask, how did you get into the ministry from being very heavily involved in church, and when did that happen?
Okay, so one day, our church, the churches we have, depending on, I guess, your faith, or
Hmm.
however your leaders do. In the beginning of each year, we have a 21-day consecration, which we do in January, throughout the month of January. They might say, okay, 21 for 21 days, read these scriptures, and we're going to fast from, sweets, meats, or, whatever the directive is. And so we was in a 21-day fast, and I was at my home one day. It was in the middle of the night, and I distinctly heard a call to
Mm.
preach. And that's really how it all began. I mean, I knew, the Bible says that, even with Jeremiah, in Jeremiah 1, he says, before the foundation, before your mother and your father, were together, I have already called you, I already ordained you.
Hmm.
So I heard this call to preach, a very distinct call. And at that point, I told my pastor. And from that point, I was kind of groomed. And as time went on, I was given more responsibility, praying, or every now and then preaching, doing Bible study. The next thing I know, I took my licensing exam. I was licensed. And then after that, I went through ordination and I was ordained. And that's how it really began. And it was something I really took to heart, because I didn't want to disappoint God again. I didn't want to backslide again,
Hmm.
because, I strongly believed in the faith, and I believe in the faith, and I believe in the power of Jesus. And I didn't want to be that person that, okay, today I'm going to be faithful to the God and to his word, but then, you know, then on the next day, you're finding me,
Yeah.
in the liquor store, or, this doing this, or, in the club. I didn't want to be that person.
Yeah.
I was sincere, and I was very gung ho, And I wanted to live out this life. I wanted to see what the calling was going to be in my life. And I loved ministry. I loved the word because I was already an art historian. So I loved history. And so the Bible is all, it's
It's
nothing
all
but history.
it's history. Yeah.
It's relevant history to me. It's alive and active
Sure.
history. So it was perfect. It was a perfect pairing for me. And that's really been my pursuit these years.
So when did you become a minister?
Actually, when I was telling you about that fast and when I heard the word preach, essentially when I heard that word preach between me and God, that was when I became a minister.
Time-wise, when was that?
Time-wise, okay, that was probably 94.
Okay.
95? Yeah.
All right. So you were clearly a preacher during a lot of the time with your second husband and so on. And
Yes.
and I am so glad that he at least did explore and learn so much. So that's a cool thing. But you've also done some other things. You deal with real estate. You're a TV show host. You're an author and well, a business owner. Yeah. But I want to learn more about some of those. But what kind of challenges have you faced in the ministry?
Yeah, I would say some of the challenges are, when you're in ministry, you have to preach or get yourself prepared for going before the people. It can be a very lonely lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if you're married, even if you have children, it can still be a lonely and demanding in its own right, because there is a mandate over your life to live not according to what you see trending now. And when I first got started in ministry, the internet was not the way it is now.
No.
No, definitely, because I mean, it was in 2000 that I got ordained, and I'm going to say the ministry had been, it was just really starting to I don't know, you guess you say make waves. That's when all of the big evangelists were coming out, like the TD Jakes, the Paula White, and the Benny Hinn, and the Juanita Bynum. That is around that time when those generation of preachers were really at the forefront. Creflo Dollar and Bishop Carlton Pearson and Rod Parsley and all these names. That's when it really began to really pick up steam. And so that was the era that I started off in. And you wanted to be a person, you wanted to be relevant, but at the same token, you trying to find that balance between family and ministry and regular life, can sometimes be really challenging. And I had to learn a lot about the order of things. First it's God, then it's family, and then it's ministry. That's the order. But a lot of times we mix up God and ministry. So what we think is, in that aspect of things that we think that are God, that are actually ministry, and they supersede your family, that's where, you can really run into some trouble. So that balance between those different aspects of my life, it was difficult. And then as a person who had a more prophetic, a revelatory call, on top of that, God is showing you things about people, about, situations that you don't necessarily ask to know about.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the Bible says, with much knowledge can often come sorrow, and that's when you begin to see God really unveiling and revealing things about people and about yourself, because you have to be able to look at yourself and not get too self-righteous, because God is showing you these things. But in the same token, you don't want to you think, okay, God, you're showing me this. What do you want me to do with this? And, somebody else might say, okay, you need to go tell that person what God showed you. I saw you doing this, da, 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 you better stop, doing this and da, 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 so busy pointing the finger.
Yeah.
But you have to remember, and it may be cliches, but you've got three pointing back at you. And so there is, you've got to be able to stay humble and yet still balance your family and still, not think yourself to be more than what you are, and yet realize that God has called you to do more in ministry than the average person. So yeah, it can be challenging,
Well,
but I wouldn't change it for anything.
it can be a challenge, but at the same time, um, you clearly were called to do it, and you work at keeping perspective. And I think that's the important thing, which goes back to college, which helped you learn a lot of discipline. And you get to use that discipline in a different way, perhaps, than
Right.
you figured out in college, but discipline is discipline.
Yeah.
Well, how did you then get into something like the media and start being a TV show host and those kinds of things?
Yeah. So I have a wonderful, wonderful pastor who really takes time to work with their members and find out what your gifts are, what your talents are, and use them. And so let's just say, so I was an artist. Okay, bottom line, I was a sculptor, painter, award-winning painter, by the way. Let me just tell you now. The first or second painting I did, I entered it into a contest at the college and I won an award. So I had a gift for this design, but in my time, we were transitioning to graphic design. Graphic design became the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I never had, if I had the aptitude to do computer science, which, bless his soul, my beautiful son is the computer scientist, right? But that gene skipped right on over me. I was not the math person. And when you said physicist, I said, that gene just totally went around me.
Yeah, so you don't know anything about 32 feet per second squared. Anyway,
No,
go
I was
ahead.
about to say, I trust you, whatever you say. And it's the funny thing is my father was a mathematician. My older brother was a chemical engineer. And me, I struggled just to pass geometry. Okay. So no, I was the artsy person.
That's fine.
But I was, yeah.
So how'd that get you to the media?
Yeah. So I was going to say, so the combination, what happened is my pastor knew a pastor who was looking for a part-time job, who was looking for someone to have a part-time job because he had he had his own publishing company in his house. At the time he published a book that talked about church growth. And this was at the time when the purpose-driven life was a purpose-driven church came out. It was a huge success. And this same thing happened with him here in Atlanta. But no publishing company wanted to take his story because the society was inundated with this purpose-driven church. It was already written about. It was already done. They didn't want his story. So he decided to create his own publishing company, and it was in the basement of his mansion. And he was looking for someone to be the secretary. So I came in, it was a friend of a friend of a friend. They hired me, and I started working for him as a secretary. And then they would bring these books over, and he would, send them out to be edited, and then bring them back, and then I would have to mail it out to the printer. Mm-hmm. And I looked at one of the books one day, and I saw it, and I noticed there were still typos in it. I said, "Sir, there's still typos in your book." "Oh, really?" "Yeah." And he had already paid this person $1,000. So I went back through it, found all these typos, and that's how I got into publishing. publishing my own books and everything like that. But then one day my pastor said, "Hey, Kay, why don't you do a radio show?" I was like, "Okay, sure," right? Because I had met so many people in
Right.
ministry from doing their books. So I called the radio station, the local AM station, and I said, "Hey, how much does it cost to do a show? Blah, 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 blah." And I was sponsored by my pastor and some other people. And I started a 30-minute show every week. It was called Personalities, Profiles, and Perspectives, the three Ps. And I would interview people, gospel artists, pastors, just politicians, just people. I would reach out to them. Next thing I know, I got hired by a station in another station in Atlanta. It was called WG. I don't know if you remember well, you probably don't because you're not from Atlanta, right? But it was WGUN 1010 AM in Atlanta. The biggest AM station aside from WSB radio, which is WSB 750, the major news network.
Right.
WGUN 1010 was a huge station. And I got hired by them. I was a DJ. It was a gospel station. And I ended up being the program director and did a lot of, voiceovers. I did shows. I did production. That's how I got into radio. And I loved it. I loved radio. I loved anything to do with media. It was just, I knew it. I got bit with the bug. When they opened up that hot mic, that was it. I was in my element. So that's how I got into radio.
And then you went to TV.
And then I went to TV. Yeah, went to TV. Well, what happened is I was writing books, and there is a station here in Atlanta, WATC TV 57, and they interview people all over the country. You can come from wherever, we've had big names, all kinds of people and local people. And that's one thing about it is that local people in ministry could go there. They could sing if they were music artists. They could, talk about their books, talk about their ministry. And so I went on and talked about my book. And next thing I know, I got called in to be a host. And so I've been hosting now for about 5 years.
Wow.
On and off. The show has different hosts each night, and I do a couple of times a month.
Okay.
I'll actually be on there shortly again in a few days.
So tell us about your books. You've mentioned books several times. Did you publish your own books? Did you self-publish?
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
So tell us about your books.
So yeah, the first 4 books. I've had 4 books which were on prophecy. The main title is Prophecy in the 21st Century, and then I did 4 different volumes. The first one was The Role of Prophecy in the New Millennium, and basically that one was written in I'm going to say around 2012, somewhere about 2012, and it talks about the relevance of prophecy with regard to the millennial generation and how prophecy can help steer, direct, and go alongside millennial mindset, and any millennial aspects of this generation. And then the second book was also under the same volume, the same name, Prophecy in the 21st Century. The first one was The Role of Prophecy in the New Millennium. The second one was Prophetic Healing. And prophetic healing talks about prophecy and healing in the Bible and how prophetic people who operate in the prophetic can help bring forth healing, societal healing, relational healing, physical healing, financial. And then the third one was about prophetic women. And these are women in the Bible that had a prophetic calling, not necessarily called a prophetess, but display those characteristics of women that operate in revelation and that sort of gift. And then the fourth one is called The Leadership Mandate. And it talks about leaders and how leaders navigate in the prophetic arena and the characteristics that people ought to have, and leaders in the Bible that also operated in that revelation or that
Hmm.
call. And then the last book I wrote was called The 30 Names, or not the, but 30 Names of God, because there are so many more names that God is known by, but I chose 30 names that really stood out to me as what God is called, Jehovah Gabor, the warrior, one who fights for us. You know, uh, Jehovah Jireh, of course, we know that's our provider.
Hmm.
Jehovah Rapha, our healer. So I found 30 names that really stood out to me, and I spoke about those in that book. So those are the books that I have. And then I've got another book that will be coming out within the next year, and it is about healing. So those are my books, and I published those books. And not only I didn't start off publishing my own books. I started off publishing for other people
Right.
because the more I worked in that field, the more I found that I could do better financially if I did it myself.
Yeah.
So, one thing about it is that as a result of being an artist, that the graphic design, computer graphics came really easy to me.
I'll bet.
So, yeah, so someone could hand me a manuscript. I had the editing skills, right? For my mother. So I could edit your book. I could create the design. I could format it. You hand me your manuscript. I hand you back your finished product.
Yeah.
So for me, the cheapest person to, I pay the least amount because so I could publish as many books as I could write probably, but that's how I really got started doing that. And then I began to do it for other people, other leaders, other pastors, friends, just people that want that service. I provide that service. And so that's how that really got started.
Now, we don't have a lot of time, but I'm
Sure.
just curious. You also do something in real estate?
I do, yeah. I got my license in 2005 and
Oh my
practiced for
gosh.
maybe 1 year, maybe 1 year. And then I got out of it right away. Life happened.
Uh-huh.
And then I came back in 2022 and began to did it full time. And so I love it. I love real estate. Right now I'm in residential, but I do some commercial.
Mm.
And the ultimate goal is to do mostly commercial. Uh, and to have uh, a space. The goal for commercial is to really help others, entrepreneurs who are interested in having businesses offline, uh, giving them an opportunity to have a space that is little to nothing. And that's one of the ways that I really want to give back is to be able to offer that opportunity for people out there to help others to achieve that same goal. And so I believe in I've been an entrepreneur for 17 years now.
Yeah.
So yeah, have a heart for that. So I want to see other people get through that challenge and be successful. So, and I
Yeah.
know it takes money, but
Real estate helps.
it definitely helps. Yeah. And
Well,
real estate is constantly going up, even
yeah,
if the market is down and even if finances are down, real estate is something that is immovable.
it
So
won't go back up.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
And you clearly enjoy everything that you're doing, which is the important thing.
Yes, I
Well,
have
that
to.
is really cool. And I am so glad that we had a chance to talk about all this, needless to say. And
Yeah.
I want to thank you for being on Unstoppable Mindset. Clearly, you have an unstoppable mindset and you exhibit it in so many ways. So I really want to thank you. But I also want to thank all of you for listening out there, wherever you happen to be. If you'd like to reach out to Kay, how can people find you?
They can go to my website. It is my name, kaythompson.org. All my books are there, contact information, some of my podcasts. You can watch some of Atlanta Live, the videos of the shows. It's all on my website.
All right. And that's in the notes and so on. So KAYTHOMPSON.org.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
hope that you'll all go there and and check Kay out and communicate with her. I'm sure that she would love, and I would love to know what you think and get your thoughts about today. So please feel free to email me at Michael H I MICHAELHI at accessibe.com. Wherever you're observing our podcast today, please give us a 5-star rating. We value very highly your reviews, and we, of course, love them most when you give us a 5-star review. So please do that. And Kay, for you and for everyone who is out there today, if you know anyone else who ought to be on Unstoppable Mindset, I would really appreciate it if you'd introduce us. And we will bring them on the podcast because we're always looking for people who have stories to tell about their lives and being unstoppable. So please don't hesitate to let us know. You can also go to our podcast page, which is Michael Hingson, MICHAELHINGSON.com/podcast. So we'd love you to do that as well. But again, really appreciate all you being out there and listening to us. And I'm sure you like I have gotten some wonderful things out of talking with Kay. So Kay, once again, I want to thank you for being here. This has been absolutely wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate you asking me to be here, and just so glad to be able to share with you today and your audience. Really appreciate it.